The stages were flooded with light. The concerts stretched late into the night. Audiences shouted the names of their favorite R&B legends until their voices broke, but none of them saw what happened when the lights went out. Behind those love songs and slow jams were hospital corridors, police phone calls, unanswered texts, and parents who would have traded every platinum record just to rewind one single minute. A singer who once promised eternal love stood frozen at an operating room door while her child died on the table. A quiet father known for timeless ballads went silent for years after a rainy night crash stole his daughter on an empty road. We remember their voices, not their collapses. What you're about to open is not a chart history. It's a file of 23 lives, each marked by a single, unbearable sentence: your child didn't make it. If one of these stories leaves you wordless, that shock is its own kind of tribute. 23. Ann Peebles, the mother who screamed in the rain. One cold February morning, passers-by in Memphis reportedly saw a woman standing motionless at a busy intersection soaked through in a storm. No umbrella, no coat, just eyes fixed on a dark stain on the asphalt that the rain could not wash away. It was Ann Peebles, the legendary voice behind "I Can't Stand the Rain." The woman who had once turned falling water into music was now staring at the place where her only son had died. Daryl, 23, had been on his way to see her after a recording session. He was a rising hip-hop producer, the kind of quiet, hungry talent Ann believed would carry their family's sound into a new generation. She had promised him an album written just for him, a record about motherhood, gratitude, and watching your child grow into his own artist. According to police reports, Daryl left the gym that evening and texted his mom, "I'm coming right over. Don't eat alone." It was the last message he ever sent. Witnesses later told investigators that a drunk driver ran a red light in the rain. The intersection's signal had been reported as faulty for months, but no repairs had been made. The pavement was slick. One streetlight was out, leaving a pocket of darkness exactly where Daryl's car was struck. He died at the scene. Ann was said to have rushed there still in house shoes. For 3 years after the crash, she disappeared from the stage. She took every photo of Daryl off the living room walls, but she kept his worn sneakers under her bed. In the mornings, neighbors heard her whisper to those shoes, "Daryl, I woke up early today. You can sleep a little longer." A close friend later recalled Ann breaking down once and screaming, "If I hadn't told him to come that night, if I hadn't been hungry, he would still be here." Years later, she released a short, untitled track that never made the radio. The chorus repeated a single line over and over: "You came, but you never came." No one asked what it meant. The older fans already knew. They cried quietly and let the song play to the end. Some artists sing to fill arenas. Others only ever wanted to sing for one person. When that person is gone, the music never sounds the same. 22. Millie Jackson, the woman who never cries in public. "As long as I got you by my side." On stage, Millie Jackson was fire, sharp tongue, bold lyrics, the fearless queen of soul who laughed in the face of heartbreak. But behind a set of closed hospital curtains, people say she once cried like a 5-year-old. Her first daughter, Celia, was only 5 when doctors diagnosed a rare aggressive form of leukemia. It moved faster than anyone expected. There was no slow decline, just a blur of test results and grim faces. Millie was on tour in Atlanta when she got the call that Celia had spiked a dangerous fever and was being rushed to the hospital. She canceled the show midday, tore up her European schedule, and stayed by her child's bedside. For 2 weeks every night, nurses heard her sing lullabies and soft soul hooks to Celia, promising the future. "When you get out of here, I'm taking you to the studio. We'll blast the radio in the car and scream together down the freeway. No seatbelts for our voices." Celia never made it to the studio. She died in her sleep, still holding the small white teddy bear Millie had picked up in a New York airport gift shop. Millie didn't issue a statement. There were no press releases, no televised mourning, no cameras at the funeral. Only a handful of friends knew what had happened, and a mysterious track on a later album titled "The Last Lullaby." Over a bare whisper soft arrangement, Millie repeated one line. Are you asleep? Don't dream about needles. I'm here. Her manager later said that after Celia's death, Millie still burned bright on stage, but in the studio something was missing. She would look at the camera, then past it as if waiting for a little face that never appeared. People say mothers who lose children don't ever really come back. They keep walking, talking, and working, but the part of them that laughed freely is buried with the child. 21. William Bell, the father who never forgave his city. William Bell, the man behind the aching classic, You Don't Miss Your Water, never imagined that his own worst drought would come from a pool of blood on a Memphis sidewalk. His son Tyler was 17, a polite high schooler, good at sports, obsessed with music, soft-spoken, in a way that reminded everyone of his father. One afternoon, Tyler stopped at a neighborhood grocery store to grab a drink for his little sister. According to witnesses, a group of young men with a history of beef with Tyler's friends pulled up. Words were exchanged then. Someone drew a gun. Tyler didn't have time to run. Neighbors later said William arrived still in pajamas, sprinting down the street. He dropped to the ground and held his son in the middle of the crime scene, ignoring officers and paramedics who begged him to step away. He stayed there for nearly 3 hours, rocking back and forth, blood soaking into his clothes, until they finally convinced him to let go. Just 3 days before Tyler had reportedly asked Dad, "Do you think Memphis is safe?" William had laughed it off, "As long as you're close to home." He had secretly written a song called The Boy Behind My Voice, planning to record it with Tyler that summer. After the shooting, the studio went silent. For 2 years, William released no new music, gave no interviews, and withdrew from public events. But he wrote letters, dozens of them, to city officials demanding action on street violence, not as a musician, but as a father. At a memorial for an unidentified gun violence victim, he spoke briefly into a microphone and said, "There isn't a note in any song that can describe this kind of pain. I don't write now. I just repeat my son's death until someone listens." People began calling him the father who never forgave the city. And every time Memphis hears his name, some remember not just the smooth voice, but the image of a boy who never got to finish his verse. 20. Linda Jones, the mother who didn't have time to call her child's name. On July 3, read 1994, while America prepared for fireworks, Linda Jones, once known as the Soulful Voice, was live on a radio show celebrating the 20th anniversary of her song, Hypnotized. Before the host cut her mic, she whispered, "This one is for my baby girl. Stay strong, my love." Her daughter Teena had just turned 21. She was a nursing student, smart, independent, and secretly living with type 1 diabetes. According to friends, she hid the diagnosis because she didn't want her mother worrying one more day in a life already full of other people's problems. "I'll handle it," she reportedly told a roommate. "She's taken care of the world. She deserves a break from taking care of me." That night, while Linda was still glowing from the broadcast, Teena collapsed alone in her dorm room during a severe hypoglycemic episode. An insulin needle lay on the floor. Her phone screen showed an unsent call attempt to Mom. When Linda drove to campus the next morning to pick her up for the holiday, the door wouldn't open. The dorm guard unlocked it, and they found Teena slumped in a chair, unresponsive. On the desk in shaky handwriting was the beginning of a letter, "If one day you find out, I'm sorry." Teena had once told her best friend she was terrified of disappointing her mother with any sign of weakness. To her, Linda was an unbreakable symbol, strong, healthy, always standing tall against the storms of show business. She didn't want to become the crack in that image. After Teena's death, Linda practically vanished from public life. No shows, no recording sessions, no interviews. The only time she stepped onto a stage was at a public health conference in New Jersey, where she didn't sing a note. "I am a mother who did not hear her child's call for help," she said into the microphone. "If anyone is silent, listen harder." She kept Teena's little wristwatch on her nightstand. The hands forever stopped at 8:17 a.m., the time doctors pronounced her daughter dead. There are some calls a mother keeps answering in her head for the rest of her life, even when the line is gone. 19. Jean Knight, the mother whose son became a silent hero. On November 14, 2001, outside Baton Rouge, Jean Knight, famous for the funk anthem, Mr. Big Stuff, had just wrapped filming for a Throwback Soul campaign. She texted her son, "I'm done. Want to grab something to eat?" Her son Derek, 28, was a social worker and a quiet protector in his neighborhood. People later said he had stepped between angry kids and weapons more times than anyone realized. That evening, on his walk home, Derek came across two groups of young men ready to fight with knives and bats. A street vendor recalled hearing him shout, "We don't need another funeral out here." He pushed his way between them, palms open. In the confusion, someone pulled a gun. Derek was shot in the chest. Jean got the call less than 20 minutes after she had uploaded behind-the-scenes photos from set. She arrived at the hospital still in full-stage makeup, lights from the studio still clinging to her dress. Doctors could only tell her there was nothing more they could do. The next day, the local paper ran a small headline, "The hero no one knew." Only then did the city learn that Derek had reportedly broken up more than 10 potentially deadly conflicts in the last year alone. In a letter found hidden in his drawer, he had written to his mother, "You sing to show people the good. I'm just trying to live like you." Jean Knight never performed again after Derek's death. Instead, she launched a small nonprofit called Mr. Small Acts with the motto, "You don't have to be big to stop violence. You just have to be brave." When someone later asked her if she wished her son hadn't stepped in that night, she answered quietly, "I wish there were no guns. But I never wish my child to be a coward." 18. Shirley Brown, the mother who couldn't escape the smell of fire. January 2, 2003. While most people were still shaking off New Year's parties, Shirley Brown, the powerhouse voice behind Woman to Woman, was wrapping up a cozy family gathering at home. Her 12-year-old son Malik loved to cook. That afternoon he had been proudly baking cakes from recipes he'd found online, racing between the kitchen and the living room with flour on his shirt. Shirley stepped outside to chat with neighbors. She caught a faint burning smell but figured it was just something in the oven. According to the fire report, within minutes, flames exploded out of the kitchen. The alarm system malfunctioned. The back door's safety lock jammed. Neighbors later said they heard Malik scream from a window, "Mom, I can't open it." By the time firefighters broke in, Malik had died from smoke inhalation. What haunted Shirley most was their argument the night before. She had scolded him for a bad math grade, snapping, "You play around all day. If you fail, that's on you." Those were the last clear words she ever said to him. After the funeral, she retreated to her bedroom and barely left for a year. No performances, no interviews, no church. She told friends that even in a freshly repaired house, she could still smell smoke every night, as if the fire had moved inside her. In Malik's toy box, she eventually found a small note in crooked handwriting: "When I grow up, I'm going to be a singer like you, but I won't make you sad." Shirley eventually returned to the stage, but every time she performed Woman to Woman, she reportedly changed the final ad-lib, turning the song into a quiet promise from mother to son. "I'm still here." No one ever really walks away from a fire that takes a child. They just learn to sing through the ashes. 17. Betty Wright, the mother no one dares to name her son around. Betty Wright, whose voice once carried America through heartbreak with songs like Tonight, is the night carried a heartbreak of her own that almost no one dared mention. Her eldest son, Patrick, 21, an aspiring rapper, was killed in a Miami shooting that authorities never fully explained. The headlines were brief: "Young man killed in drive-by." No probing articles, no investigative specials, just a line or two noting that he was the son of a famous singer. According to a close friend, Patrick left the studio that evening grinning, headphones around his neck, telling his mother, "I'll be back in half an hour. You're listening to my track first. Okay?" He never made it back. He was shot in front of an empty house, on a quiet street with no security cameras and no reliable witnesses. Police chalked it up to personal conflict. Betty believed there was more to the story, but doors closed quickly. In a rare interview, she said, "I taught my child to turn pain into music, but it feels like the world only wanted his silence." She created a music foundation in his name to support young black artists in dangerous neighborhoods, but she refused to stamp her own name on it. "I'm not doing this as Betty Wright," she explained. "I'm doing this as a mother, making sure her child's name is spoken again." Some deaths never become front-page news. For a mother, they don't have to. The headline is written in her chest forever. 16. Billy Paul, the father who forbids anyone from mentioning his last tour. Billy Paul's voice made me and Mrs. Jones a worldwide confession of forbidden love. Few people know he had another forbidden chapter 1, he personally banned from conversation. In 1992, he planned a small cross-state tour and decided to bring his wife and his youngest daughter, Angela, then 17. Angela had inherited not only his tone, but his ear for melody. In a local radio interview, Billy smiled and said, "She's my little angel. I'm more excited for people to hear her than me." On the fourth night after a show in Cincinnati, Angela took a separate car back to the hotel. A truck reportedly lost control on the slick highway and slammed into her vehicle. Billy, riding in the car behind, only saw flashing lights and officers unfolding a tarp over a body on the road. There were no big stories on the news, no national mourning. Billy vanished from the public eye for almost 5 years. Family members say he removed every photograph of Angela from the walls and boxed them away, but each night he lit a candle at his desk and sat there until sunrise, not reading, not writing, just existing. Angela left behind an unfinished demo tape. Billy kept it locked away. When asked why he never released it, he answered, "If the world hears her voice, who is going to comfort me when I need to hear it alone?" Not every love song is written for the charts. Some are never recorded because they already live where no microphone can reach. 15. Denise Williams, the mother nobody knew, had just lost her son. Denise Williams, whose voice carried hope in anthems like "Let's Hear It for the Boy," moved through interviews with a calm smile, thanking God and fans in equal measure. Almost no one realized she was walking around with a crater in her life. Her son, known to family as CJ, died of leukemia. There was no press release, no televised funeral, only a quiet goodbye that remained private for years. CJ was reserved, not drawn to the spotlight. After a routine checkup, doctors discovered the cancer. According to those close to the family, CJ begged his mother to keep everything quiet. He didn't want pity pieces. He didn't want reporters knocking on the door. Denise canceled her shows and sat by his side through treatment day after day. In a private diary entry later quoted by a friend, she wrote, "I used to sing to thousands. Now I only sing to one person and I can still feel him slipping away." On an April evening, while spring sunlight pooled through the blinds of a Chicago hospital room, CJ's breathing slowed. Denise reportedly sang a childhood rhyme as he closed his eyes for the last time. There were no cameras, only a mother and a son, in a room that would never feel full again. When Denise eventually returned to public life, her composure seemed intact. But any time she was asked about her family, she would answer, "I raised beautiful souls. Some are still here. Some are in a better place now. Some mothers don't need to collapse in public for you to understand their grief." Sometimes, the softest sentence is the loudest scream. Their silence becomes their longest song. You've just walked through the first corridors of this archive, stories that the world rarely revisits, but that these parents live with every single day. And yet, we are only halfway in. There are still names we haven't spoken, accidents that never made the news, and songs that were never finished. 14. Fontella Bass, the mother of the stopped note. One quiet June morning in 2005, the phone rang in Fontella Bass's old St. Louis studio, while she was sitting alone staring at a wall of gold records that suddenly felt meaningless. On the other end was a hospital nurse. Her son Daryl, 30, had collapsed at home and was being rushed into the ER. The woman who'd once begged the world to rescue me couldn't rescue her own child. Daryl had suffered a massive stroke. Doctors stabilized him for a moment, then watched helplessly as his brain shut down. He never woke up. 2 nights earlier, mother and son had shared dinner. Fontella had promised to take him to France on what she called her farewell nostalgia tour. Daryl joked, "This time you're not leaving me behind, Ma, I'm coming." Looking back, friends remembered the warning signs: Daryl's constant fatigue, his shortness of breath-splitting headaches that sent him to bed early. When they told him to see a doctor, he waved it off. "Mom needs to sing, not worry," he said. When Fontella finally saw him on the stainless steel table of the cold room, she whispered almost automatically, "Why didn't you call me like in my old song?" From that day on, she refused to perform "Rescue Me" again. "How can I sing about salvation," she said quietly, "when the one person who needed me most is gone?" Some hearts don't stop because the body fails. They stop because love arrives too late. 13. Peabo Bryson, the father, still waiting for a message. Across 4 decades, Peabo Bryson's voice defined gentle devotion, a whole new world, if ever you're in my arms again, promises of safety and forever. But he couldn't protect the person who needed him most. His son Robert was in his final year of college, on a music scholarship, sending his father demos between exams. One night, Peabo's texts went unanswered. By morning, Robert's roommate found him collapsed on the bathroom floor. The coroner's report named the cause a drug overdose. Peabo read the file in disbelief. He had thought his son was disciplined, quiet, focused. No parties, no smoking, no signs. Only later did investigators uncover an old prescription for antidepressants. Robert had never told anyone. The sadness sat in silence until it consumed him. 2 days before he died, Peabo had sent a simple message: "When I finish recording, send me something new. I want to hear what you're working on." The text remained unread. After the funeral, Peabo walked into the studio, sat in front of the microphone, and stayed there for hours without singing a single note. On a blank sheet of paper, he wrote one sentence: "I was a father, but not close enough to see where it hurt." He eventually founded a counseling initiative for music students, focusing on mental health and hidden struggle. "I couldn't save my boy," he said, "but I can listen to other people's children before it's too late. Some songs are written with ink. Others are written with tears that never dry." 12. Percy Sledge, the father searching for a red light in the dark. Percy Sledge, whose "When a Man Loves a Woman" became the soundtrack to countless romances, spent his last years haunted by a single night on a lonely Alabama road. His son Michael, 24, worked late at a small recording studio. On his drive home, rain turned the highway into a sheet of glass. Investigators believe he swerved to avoid a deer lost control and slammed into a utility pole. There were no witnesses, no cameras, only a single report of a loud crash and a brief flash of light in the darkness. Father and son had been planning a special project, a new version of "Take Time," to Know Her, recorded as a duet for the song's 50th anniversary. Michael had been practicing the guitar part for months. He never made it to the session. When Percy reached the crash site, the tow truck was already pulling what was left of his son's car out of the trees. He stood by the roadside for 3 silent hours, unmoving until dawn washed the scene in pale light. He kept performing afterward, but with a new demand: no red lights on stage. "The last thing I saw on my boy's face," he told a technician once, "was the reflection of a red emergency light. I don't want to see that color on me." Some fathers don't cry where anyone can see them. They just quietly erase every reminder they can, except the pain which refuses to leave. 11. Mavis Staples, the mother by heart, who lost a second son. On August 15, 1998, at a concert celebrating the power of gospel's return, Mavis Staples slipped away backstage just before showtime. Crew members thought she was tired. Family members knew better. That morning, her nephew Leon, the son of her brother and fellow Staple Singers member Purvis, had died after a long battle with a rare genetic blood disorder. Leon had grown up backstage calling Mavis second mama, carrying cables and humming harmonies before he could spell his own name. Mavis had promised to take him on his first European tour, but doctors forbade it. A few days before he passed, Leon secretly recorded himself singing "I'll Take You There," the family anthem, and sent it to her. "For when you're overseas and I'm not," he wrote. After his funeral, Mavis went silent for a week. When she finally addressed the audience at a memorial, she spoke only one line before the choir began. "I've brought millions of souls a little piece of peace, but I couldn't keep my own child here for one more day." Blood doesn't decide who you mourn like a mother. Love does. 10. Gladys Knight, the mother who missed a call. On July 23, 1999, Gladys Knight was in Atlantic City, locked in a production meeting rehearsing yet another performance of Midnight Train to Georgia. Her phone lit up with a call from her son James Jimmy Newman. She saw it meant to call back and slipped the phone face down on the table. By nightfall, Jimmy was gone. He had been his mother's manager and protector, walking with her through lawsuits, career setbacks, and late-night drives between shows. In recent years, friends noticed a shift: his long hours alone, his complaints about feeling drained by fame, his whispered mentions of depression. That evening, hotel staff found him unresponsive in his room. The cause, a drug overdose. On his phone there was an unsent text addressed to Mom. "Can you sing to me like you used to just once?" Gladys read that message right before stepping on stage to sing at his memorial. She performed Midnight Train to Georgia, but every note sounded like a plea to a son sitting in a seat that would never be filled again. "If I could rewrite time," she said later, "I'd miss every train, every show, every spotlight just to answer that one call." Sometimes the loudest applause in the world can't drown out a single missed ring. 9. Al Green, the father who learned the news from a stranger's headline. One ordinary morning in 2004, Al Green sat at his kitchen table, flipping through the newspaper as he sipped his coffee. A small item caught his eye: a young man with his last name had been found dead in a Memphis apartment from an apparent overdose. The story was barely a paragraph long. The young man was Terrence Al Green's biological son from an earlier relationship, a son he had acknowledged legally but rarely spoken about in public. Terrence had tried to follow his father into music and met closed doors stage after stage. Friends later said that weeks before his death, Terrence wrote in his journal, "Some names echo across the world, but they can't hear the quiet voices calling them Dad." After Terrence's funeral, Al never spoke his name in interviews. Instead, in one of his last major performances that year, he sang "How Can You Mend a Broken Heart" and improvised a verse that no one outside the family understood. Only those who have buried a child know that sometimes forgiveness comes late and repentance arrives with no one left to hear it. 8. Isaac Hayes, the father who couldn't save his son from the water. Isaac Hayes, the deep-voiced titan behind the theme from Shaft, was used to being seen as invincible. But there was one story the public almost never heard because he didn't want the cameras anywhere near it. His son Joseph, 20, died on a Florida vacation. The accident happened on Lake Okeechobee. Joseph had taken a small boat out alone without a life jacket. At some point, the vessel flipped. By the time rescuers reached him, he was gone. A close friend later revealed that Joseph had actually called his father days earlier to say he had a bad feeling about the trip and was thinking of cancelling. Isaac, busy with shows in Europe, left a short voicemail: "Instead, relax and enjoy yourself, you deserve it." 3 days after Joseph disappeared beneath the water, his body was found tangled near a reed bed. The press barely mentioned the connection to Isaac Hayes, using only an initial and a last name. In the years that followed, Hayes quietly appeared at water safety seminars and swimming awareness events, slipping in and out without fanfare. He donated money, avoided microphones, and left before anyone could thank him. Maybe that was the only way he knew to answer the one piece of advice that haunted him: relax, you deserve it. 7. Barry White, the father who didn't know where his son lay. Barry White, the king of velvet-voiced seduction, carried a crushing secret behind the love songs and slow jams: a missing son and a grave he didn't know existed for years. As a young man, Barry had fathered a boy in a brief relationship. The child Michael drifted in and out of his life. One year he was planning to visit, the next he was away at school. Behind the scenes, Barry hired private investigators to find him. For 4 years there was nothing. In 1998, authorities discovered an unidentified body in a remote canyon near Bakersfield, California. It took nearly 2 years and DNA testing to make the match. The deceased was Michael White, killed during a petty robbery and dumped in the desert. He had been lying in an unmarked grave while the world danced to his father's voice. When the news finally reached Barry, he offered no public comment. In a later interview, asked vaguely about regret, he said one quiet line, "I wrote hundreds of love songs, but not one was for the son I never got to hug goodbye." He later funded a small scholarship at a local high school under the initials M.W. No one outside the family knew what those letters meant. Love, in his case, became a code etched into the lives of strangers' children because his own child was beyond help. 6. Smokey Robinson, the father who couldn't outsing the silence. Smokey Robinson, Motown's poet of tender love, spent years singing other people's feelings into words. But when one of his sons died by suicide while being treated for a mental disorder, language failed him. The son, whose name he has deliberately kept out of the spotlight-studded film, kept to himself, hated interviews. In a letter discovered after his death, he wrote, "Dad always has something to say to the world. I just wanted one word that was only for me." Smokey later appeared at a mental health conference without tying his attendance to any personal tragedy. He spoke not about melodies or records, but about silence, how it can wrap around someone until they disappear inside it. A few years later, at a small charity show, he performed a song called "Quiet Room." It never appeared on an album, never hit radio, and was played only that night. The lyrics described a son sitting alone in a closed room waiting for someone to knock and ask if he was okay. There were no cameras, just a handful of witnesses who understood they were seeing a father grieve in the only language he had left. Sometimes the most important thing isn't advice. It's simply being there long enough to hear the pain. 5. Patti LaBelle, the mother who buried a son without an adopted label. One afternoon, in March 1992, Patti LaBelle was preparing to step into the booth for a new album when the phone rang from the hospital. Her son Stanley had suffered a violent seizure. Doctors didn't know why. Stanley was not her biological child. He was a teenager Patti had taken in from the streets, a quiet, respectful boy who loved music and followed her everywhere like a shadow. To her, he was simply my son. By the time she reached the ICU, the fight was already over. Stanley had died from a rare neurological condition the doctors admitted they had never seen before. There were no early symptoms anyone recognized, no warning. Just one sudden emergency and a line on a death certificate. Patti refused to stage a grand funeral. She demanded a small service and banned reporters. No one was allowed to use the phrase "adopted son." In her private journal, she wrote, "If I were a real mother, I would have known. But I felt his pain only when it was too late." Maybe motherhood isn't about blood. It's about whose suffering you can't walk away from. Some families are built from DNA. Others are built from a single promise: you are mine, and I will hurt when you hurt. 4. Marvin Gaye, the father who still hears a voice on tape. June 12, 1982. Marvin Gaye had just signed a deal to re-release a collection of soul ballads and was dreaming of a comeback. He called his eldest son Marvin Gaye and told him he wanted him to direct the first music video. 2 weeks later, the younger Marvin was found unconscious in his living room. Drugs were in his system. The paramedics couldn't revive him. The police found a cassette on a nearby table with a handwritten label for Dad. On it, his son had recorded a rough vocal track and a final message: "I hope you're proud of me." After the funeral, Marvin, sir, vanished into a hotel room with his son's tape. A friend said he played it over and over, sometimes all night, sometimes rewinding the same 8 bars until daylight. When he finally emerged, Marvin said softly, I've sung about love my whole life, but I failed to teach my son how to live when he felt alone. For some parents, a child's death is not an ending. It's a final lesson in what they should have said long before it was too late. 3. Diana Ross, the mother who learned of the crash too late. On October 19, 2003, a tiny, easily overlooked news item reported that a young woman had died in a mysterious single-car accident outside Los Angeles. No one reading the paper that morning knew she was Diana Ross's stepdaughter. Her name was Amina, 26, a fashion designer who avoided the spotlight and refused to trade on the Ross name. She had been driving alone from Palm Springs to the city heading in before sunrise. Somewhere along the route, her car left the road and plunged into a ravine. No skid marks. No surveillance footage. No witnesses. Police suggested she might have fallen asleep. Her mother didn't accept it. Days later, family members found an unread text on Diana's phone. "I feel like someone is following me." Diana canceled her European tour and disappeared. She requested a private burial banning cameras and press. For nearly a year, she stayed off television, off red carpets, off magazine covers. At her comeback show, she looked up into the stage lights and whispered into the mic almost to herself, "Today I'm home." Some losses never make the tabloids. They live instead in the way a mother hesitates before getting in a car, or the way she looks twice at her rearview mirror every night. 2. Teena Turner, the mother who couldn't stop a final goodbye. On July 3, 2018, in her home in Switzerland, Teena Turner answered a call from Los Angeles that shattered whatever peace she had managed to build after a brutal life. Her eldest son, Craig Raymond Turner, 59, had died by suicide with a gun in his home. Craig had been the one constant in her life through years of abuse and chaos, the child who saw her bruises, the one who hugged her after farewell shows and told her she could finally rest. A few days before his death, he had mailed her a letter. "Don't worry," it said. "I just want peace." After the funeral, Teena spoke publicly only once about his death. "I thought I was a survivor," she said, "but this time I couldn't save my child." Craig died right when she had finally declared that she was done with violence, done with running. The peace she had chased for decades turned into a hollow silence that followed her until the end of her life. Some storms return even after the thunder stops. They arrive with a phone call and never fully leave. 1. Stevie Wonder, the father who never got to say the name. On April 11, 1974, at the height of his genius, Stevie Wonder rushed into a hospital after being told his newborn baby had serious complications right after birth. The infant lived only a few hours. There was no loud first cry, no chance to feel the tiny fingers wrap around his. Doctors told Stevie he could touch the child's cheek, but he couldn't hold the body. By the time his hand found the skin, it was already cold. He had picked out a name, Harmony, but it was never written on a birth certificate. There was no christening, no first photo, only a brief medical record and a burial many people never knew happened. Friends say that night, Stevie sat alone at a piano and played a wordless piece for nearly 3 hours, tears falling silently as his fingers searched for a melody that could hold a life that never got to start. Years later he wrote, "Isn't she lovely for another daughter?" Those close to him believe the original first verse had been intended for the child he lost. The world heard a celebration. He heard an echo. Some children never appear in the public record, but they live forever in the pauses between chords and the notes that linger too long. Behind these songs there are hospital monitors, late-night phone calls, empty chairs at family tables, and artists who keep singing not because the pain is gone, but because it's the only way to stay connected to the voices they lost. If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the comments.